You're listening to Strictly Creative, available on Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music, and wherever you get your podcasts. Today's guest is Captain. He's a hip-hop artist, filmmaker, and founder of Soul City and Northern Touch Films. A cultural force in Ottawa since the 90s, he's built platforms for African, Black, and Caribbean Canadian voices, and is a founding member of the Origin Arts and Community Center, a creative hub where local artists can grow, thrive, and tell their stories. This episode was recorded at the National Arts Center in Ottawa. Let's get to the interview.
Greetings, my name is Captain, aka the Intellectual Stimulator.
So just before we hit record, thank you for joining us first and foremost.
You're welcome, you're welcome.
So just before I hit record, I was just saying that, you have so much history in this city as a creator, but you've worn many hats. You're a creator, you're an entrepreneur, and you're involved in many aspects of creativity. I don't want to answer this for you, but I just want to set it up and frame it as, you're a musician, you're a writer in terms of playwriting, you're a filmmaker, you're an event organizer as far as festivals, and you're also a creative entrepreneur. So I figured, man, I got to interview this guy. He's got a lot of history and a lot of experience. So I thought I would, but by the way, before I ask you this question, is that description of what I've said, would you say that's accurate, or correct it if it's not?
No, that's accurate. That's accurate.
Now, first question I would like to ask is, how would you describe your creative mission in one sentence?
Just being the best I could, one sentence, being the best I could at creating art that pleases me.
And elaborate on that. I know this is obviously that was one sentence. What do you mean by that?
Well, I have a creative spirit to the core of me, right? So I'm a hip hop artist at first, right? That's the base for everything that I do. Came from me being a hip hop artist in the 80s, early 80s, growing up in Toronto before moving to Ottawa. I moved to Ottawa in 1988. And every other branch of things that I do creatively, just comes from me wanting to express myself, because I had a lot that I wanted to say when I was a younger youth, even preteen, early teens and mid and late teens. I had a lot of angst and anger within me, and being a hip hop artist I tried the graffiti, expensive, right? And I didn't like my fingertips getting, with the paint. I tried DJing. My parents wouldn't buy me a turntable. But breakdancing, being a b-boy, and being an MC was the creative base where I can have an outlet that pleased me and say what I want to say. And that's how I express myself. And so everything else is just a branch off from that main trunk or stem.
Take us back to 1988 when you moved from Toronto to Ottawa. What was that first experience in this new city, the nation's capital?
At first, I very much hated it, right? I was in my mid-teens, right? And my father picked up one night, and I was already roaming wild in Toronto, but I wasn't nowhere near the inner circles of the hip-hop scene in Toronto. But my father picked up, it was a midnight on a Thursday, and I got home and he said, we're moving to Ottawa. We got on the midnight train, arrived in Ottawa at 5 a.m. in the morning, and I was very displeased with it at first, right? Toronto being Canada's kind of mecca, if you will, for arts. The black population in Toronto, the multiculturalism in Toronto, it was just a thriving place to be in 87, 88, 89, just like what New York would be for the States. So moving to Ottawa, as I tease my father now, I tease him, I said, that's like child abuse, but it was like, Ottawa was behind, right, culturally and stuff like that, and the population wasn't there as that, so I didn't like it at first. But then after settling my foot, because I was kind of like fresh meat, if you will, in Ottawa, so I stood out as far as my personality in Ottawa, and then Ottawa slowly, grew on me. And but it was a little bit behind in Ottawa, in more than Toronto as far as the creative scene goes.
If you were that midnight train to Ottawa, if that was going to be a title of a song, a play, a movie, or a collection of visual, products, if it's graffiti, if it's paintings, what would it be and why?
Well, cultural shock. It would have to show the contrast in cultural shock, right? from Toronto to Ottawa. Toronto at that time probably had about 300,000, right? People from the Caribbean and African descent. And Ottawa had just about 30,000, right? So you can understand what that was doing to me, right? But I could say that Ottawa, to me, I looked at Ottawa as a new landscape, the new frontier to really break out and do my thing, which I was a part of that. Not myself only, because there was some brothers doing their stuff before that I became friends with, and I quickly made friends. And it was a kind of era where you get in where you fit in very quickly, especially through hip hop and partying and, and I made friends very quickly. And some of these guys are my friends to this day. But I looked at it as the Wild West and the new frontier. It was an open landscape for me. And I bring my own personality, my braggadociousness, that I was from Toronto. So I thought it was the shit, only shit, nothing but the shit, you know what I mean? And sorry for the French, but but it was a new frontier, and it was wide open for the taking for anybody who wanted to do stuff artistically. That you could thrive here, but we just didn't know how to monetize it. But the artistic expression could be recognized here.
Now, if you could go back, I mean, this is almost 40 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. If you could go back 40 years to your younger self, what one piece of advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now, because you have a whole lifetime of experience in so many different creative avenues? What one piece of advice would you give to the younger captain?
I would have listened to your parents. Listen to my father, one. I disobeyed my father on many of things, right? Which, even though on the artistic side, I got to do what I wanted to do, right? But in doing so, I fractured a relationship between me and my father, right? In doing so, because I wanted to go out there, primarily through hip hop, right? And my father is an old school cat from Toronto, university educated, ex-Black Panther in the 60s in the U.S., right? From South America, Guyana, came to Canada 65, but he was messing up. His mother, my grandmother, sent him to New York. He became a Black Panther, came back to Toronto. So I was raised in that strict household. And he saw me with the hip hop going. He saw me going towards street life, right? Which eventually I kind of did have my one foot in street life, one foot in the hip hop, in the music. But I would say, listen to the elders, right? Be well balanced, right? When you want to do art, and learn the business side of art and how to monetize art. Because for us in that era, we just wanted to do it for the sake of doing it, for the accolades you get from the males, your peers, from the females, the dopamine you get when when that crowd cheers you on, but not knowing that you can make this as a sustainable living, right? We didn't know nothing about that, right? And we made a lot of mistakes, and we dilly-dallied with it for a long period of time to now it caught up to us a little bit, right? But yeah, that's what I say to my younger self.
I want to go back to the theme of entrepreneurship, because correct me if I'm wrong, I think you from as far as I remember, you actually, I believe I met you in the context of you were running a shop at one point, right? You know what I mean? You had that creative spirit, creative entrepreneurial spirit long ago, which was awesome to see. I'm thinking about, like, this is 20 plus years ago or so. But I want to ask, if you don't mind, your dad is still alive, I would imagine?
Yes, he's still alive.
And you have a good relationship with him now?
Oh yeah, that's my best friend.
That's you're very lucky. That's incredible that you have your parent still in your life, and you have that relationship, because not a lot of folks have their parents in their picture, and sometimes there's a strange what I'm saying with some parents. Without getting too much into it, my question is: it seems just from what you've said that your dad had a tremendous influence in your life as a creative, almost indirectly as a creative person. Could he become a future story in your artistic encyclopedia, but potentially? Have you already explored that as a concept? I ask that because I feel for the elders, of this broad Canadian community, this Caribbean, African, South American, Black folks, whatever you want to call them, is very diverse. There's almost not enough, maybe there are, but there are not enough stories about these individuals who've come a long time ago. Like, you know, my mom recently, for example, not to make it about me, but real quick, she's been diagnosed with dementia, and I'm just navigating that for the last 8 months. And bro, it's been quite a challenge. And I think about her life, and I'm like, my God, what a fascinating human being she is. And I'm sure anyone would say that about their parents, and they know their story and their struggles and this, that, and the other. But as a creative, have you ever thought about exploring family history, particularly your dad? Because from the way you describe them, I'm like, what? This is like straight out of a. It sounds like a great story. I'm sold already.
Well, yes, with my father, there's some things I want to probably express to you, right, about both sides of my parentage, right? Because what you're asking me does apply to my mother too, right? About putting her side of the family into some of the art that I do. But with my father, yes. So my father had a life of so many vast experiences, right? And he's had a profound impact on me, even though, you know, at one time our relationship was fractured a little bit, right? But looking back on his life, yeah, he's in the process right now of finishing up his own autobiography, right? Oh, wow. So yeah, he's writing an autobiography about himself.
Is he in Ottawa?
Yeah, he lives in Ottawa. So when we moved to Ottawa, about 6 or 7 months later, he wanted to move back to Toronto. He did move back to Toronto. And the specific reason, because he said there's not enough black people here. And I said, Dad, I want to stay.
You know? How ironic.
Yeah, I wanted to stay. And because
because you were the big fish.
I was the big fish, right? And everybody knew me as the big fish. So I was like, I got so much friends. I'm a superstar here. In Toronto, I was a tadpole in the ocean, right? So I was nowhere near those inner circles. So with that being said, he had moved back, and I said, Dad, I want to live on my own. To give you a little backstory about, you know, our life and stuff like that. So he didn't want to do it. And mind you, he ruled with an iron fist, even at that time. But I begged, and he said, okay, you can live on your own, right? And I was going to high school here. We found a place. He moved back to Toronto, and I lived on my own. But he eventually did come back to Ottawa. But by the urging, he wanted to do it himself. He saw that his children is doing so much stuff in the arts and stuff. And he said he's going to write an autobiography about himself, because when he came to Toronto, it was almost the same thing. He came in 1965, but Toronto had not so a diverse black community as it has now. He was very dark-skinned, right? And that was noticeable for Canadian blacks, right? Coming from the Caribbean with a thick accent, right? And he wanted to make friends in the Canadian black community so much that he quickly tried to delve himself in the black community there. But it was fractured, the black community, right? From Nova Scotian blacks, Toronto blacks, you know, and stuff like that. So he's writing an autobiography about himself and his life experiences and what he went through. And the book is complete. It's just getting a couple, you know, touch-ups and stuff like that. And he's going to look about if he's going to self-publish or where we're going to go there. As far as me now, he's always boasted, and I remember in the 80s, he was in a couple movies, a couple stand-ins, the most notable one with Jack Nicholson in Toronto he did, and he's always like, yo, I want to be in the movies. So I put him in my second film, you know, as a character, playing my father, right, in the movie and stuff like that, to get his little acting chops on. And I told him I'll find some places for him also in the future where I could fit him in my art. But he's instrumental in inspiring me for a lot of the art I do.
I'm just going to thank you for that. I'm just going to pull out some of my questions here, because there's a lot to ask, and I'm liking how we're just freestyling as well. When you begin something new, like a new project, what's the first question you ask yourself?
When I'm about to begin a project?
Correct.
Right, any project? One, I don't necessarily know if I ask myself anything. I just know sometimes I get inspired by random things. I could see a movie, right? And the movie might have a scenario in it, and then creativity starts coming to my mind. What would I do if I was the husband getting kicked out of the house in that scenario? You know, what would I do with that interaction with the person? And then it might go into a couple lines, a paragraph, and then I have a script, you know? If it's a song, right, what I think about is telling my story, because most of my music, when I'm doing music, is telling my story, because my life is so rich with, you know, the life experiences I've had. So, and but that's basically it. Telling my story. I don't really make, like, when it's come to songwriting, songs that are like fictional or just, you know, go happy lucky songs. It's more thought provoking, right? And it's more based in real life experiences either I went through or close friends who I've seen in my proximity. You know what I mean? My anecdotal experience, what I've witnessed.
What was the first name of the first song you ever performed, wrote and performed? And can you give us a gist of your early days as an MC?
I had a song. Well, when I was young in the '80s, there wasn't complete songs. It was just sometimes pages of one long rhyme, right? And it won't be a complete song with a chorus and stuff like that. But when I completed a full song with a name and a title, right, it was called Shockwave. Right, and I remember that song, and it's one of those kind of songs I just remember it because it's in my brain and it's dear to me. But yeah, it was called Shockwave. That was like 1985, you know. And you want a piece of that?
Please.
And now this is old school rhyme, so yeah.
I'm not. I'm interviewing you because we want to hear this. So please drop some knowledge.
Put it in context that it was about 85, and it goes, Shock, say it after me. Cause after this you gotta pay your fee. One try to hide rhymes anti-subside and realize that it is prophesized. The prince is back and that's me forever. I get more older, I get more clever. Rhymes like a lever, it breaks on walls. Your ego fails and my battle cry calls. You ran, you hid, but that didn't do. My rhymes are heat seekers, they're looking for you. You thought you were the leader? Well, look at your team. You felt my vibe and woke from your dream. Scream, now you know it's over. Rhymes faster than a speeding Nova. Faster than lightning, I strike with a blow. Your voice is feeble as my lyrics, they flow. And it's longer, but it's a long, long rhyme.
How did people react to when I believe you performed this in Ottawa? Obviously, how did people react to it?
No, because that was like I wrote that in '85, so before I moved to Ottawa.
Right.
By the time I moved to Ottawa, I considered that like an old school rhyme. You understand what I mean? But that was one of the earliest when I started seeing, this is possible. I could do this as some kind of living. I didn't know how, right? And I was inspired by a woman, actually. It was Michie Mee. Once we saw Michie Mee getting signed and touring and stuff like that, I was like, it's possible. You can get signed from this other than us just having fun as young teens, right? And I just kept it moving from there.
Quick segue. Can you tell us for those who may not know, who is Michie Mee within the Canadian broader hip-hop and music context?
Michie Mee is considered, right, as a title. She gets the title of the queen, right, of Canadian hip hop. She was the first hip hop artist to be signed to a record label, right? There was one person and then two people that released independently before her in Toronto, but she got signed to a major label, and it was a U.S. label imprint, right, that came to Toronto, saw her perform, battle tested. She battled female MCs from the States, and this is like about 3 years. Well, yeah, about 3 years before Maestro Fresh West, right, came on the scene. So with that, it's very telling that it's a female. That's one. That's the progenitor for this whole scene breaking out in Canada, in the Canadian market. And she inspired a whole wave. I'm sure it's not only me as a male MC, but countless others, that this could be done for us. This is an opportunity for us to make a living. Even though we probably didn't know how we were going to do it or how to get signed, but somebody's out there signed to a record label. It was very monumental and very inspiring.
A lot of Canadian hip-hop seems to stem a lot of it from the Canadian Caribbean community and reggae culture, and in terms of that development of that scene, but also its connections to the U.S. as far as New York and people traveling to New York. Did you back in the 80s and 90s travel to New York? Did you get? I guess what I'm asking is, were you also influenced by that New York scene?
Well, it's funny. A lot of people might not know this. A lot of Canadians that are from whatever ethnicity, right, Caucasian and other immigrant, primarily of African descent, right, might not know or understand this, right? But Toronto at that time, from 76 to 79, had 100,000 immigrants coming from the Caribbean. 100,000 came, right? When the immigration laws opened up and stuff like that, our mothers came. A lot of them was domestic workers. A lot of them was nurses and hairdressers and stuff like that. But a lot of them did PSW kind of, nursing work. And so those children that came with them, who were probably 6, 7, or 8, 9 years old at the time, or some were born in Canada, were the ones in 1990 who are now teenagers, right? So now what people don't know is a unique thing. A lot of us from Caribbean descent, we have family in New York City, right? And I might go off on a tangent here, but
Go for it.
yeah, and how this works is because from whatever Caribbean island you're from, especially if you're from the British colonies, right? So culturally, our grandparents have a lot of children, right? So on your mother's side, from Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, Antigua, St. Lucia, whatever, your mother's side, she might be one of 5, 6 children. Your father's side might be the same, 9 or 10 children. So when independence started coming in the 50s and 60s and 70s for a lot of these Caribbean nations, one of your aunties or one of your uncles might say, you know what, I'm going to try my luck in England, right? Another one of your, which will be your father's siblings, right, or your grandmother's siblings, will say, I'm going to try my luck in Miami, or I'm going to try my luck in Toronto or New York, right? And so when it's time when your parents wanted to leave now, right, they tried their luck in Toronto or Montreal, right? A lot of Jamaicans and Trinidadians went to Montreal in the late 60s, early 70s, right? So now we, as the ones who either we came up when we were infants or were born in Canada, we have cousins in England. We have cousins. We might only know them by picture and thing. We never met them, but they're our first cousins, right? In Miami, in Atlanta, and a lot in New York, in Brooklyn and Flatbush, those places. So in Toronto now, in the 70s and 80s, you have to go over when it comes to family reunion time, and you're going over there. Your family's from New York is coming up to Toronto, and your family from Toronto, you know, you're going road trips in the summertime and going, or Christmas, and visiting New York, right? And so, and that's the experience for like a lot, I would say damn near all of Caribbean descent who came up in that era in the 70s. We all have family or cousins in, you know, and kin in New York. So we're getting the tapes. We're right on par. We weren't behind of New York, you know, at when we're like 86, 87, when those years came. Hence when I can't remember, it was Ice Cream Tea, or I think it was Ice Cream Tea, or the lady that battled Mishimi, and Mishimi destroyed her, and KRS-One signed it. Those guys were amazed. We're right on point with them as far as our style, the culture, the B-boys. We weren't lagging behind in the culture. But we're getting the tapes. We're listening to the radio stations, right? The WBKLS and stuff like that, getting the radio stations from New York City and Buffalo, New York. So we're on par culturally with what's going on in the States in the inner city, right? And so that's why Toronto was that kind of hub. Geographically, too, it's not that far of a drive. And but that's what kept us on par.
That's fascinating. Thank you very much for adding context to that. I think that's very important. And if I can ask you now about the entrepreneurial bug, because the entrepreneurial bug, how and when did that begin, and what inspired it? And was that just part of also the culture as well, to think entrepreneurially and start your own business? Because I mean, for some, that's a very bold and big idea, and maybe they doubt themselves in terms of diving into entrepreneurialism. But what sparked your interest in that, but also the creative aspect of entrepreneurialism?
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, when I really started to think that, okay, this is something I want to make a living from, is probably around 1990, 91, right? And my manager for the group I was in at that time, right? The original name was the group was Captain and King LD, which was my friend. His name stood for King LD for his real name, his government name, Leighton Dillon, who lives in New York right now, right? Who changed his name later to Freddie. And our manager, Wally Ade, who's still in Ottawa right now, right?
That was your manager?
That was our manager.
Like the same Wally Ade, like the festival organizer?
Yes.
Wow.
Wally Ade was our manager he started managing us in around late 89, right? You know what I mean? And that was our manager. So, and he's the breakout one that really exposed us, took us on tour with Maestro Fresh West. So we were on tour, and we're just in our late teens, and we're seeing different parts. We're seeing Montreal, Fredericton, we're seeing Halifax, we're seeing, all different parts of Kingston, Ontario. I would have never traveled if it wasn't for him. There's no reason for me to ever go to Halifax, right? And probably to this day, why would I? So far, right? So, and then when I saw Wally, and I said, what? He's making money? Because I was that kind of youth where I always try to sit near older people. And there's this Caribbean saying, hey, children should be, you know what I mean? Seen but not heard or whatever. But I'm always, prying and listening and cocking my ears and listening to big people's conversations. And I would listen to the contracts he would make, and I would listen to some of the stuff he was doing. And when I was hearing when him count the money at the end of the shows, I was like, that's how much promoters make? This is how much artists make? That's how much Maestro was charging at that time, $8,000, $10,000 a show? I was like, whoa, that was mind-boggling to me, right? And so he started me off on that, thinking this is what I wanted to do. Now that, it's not just fun and games because the girls like it or your friends like it, you could make money from this. And this is, it grounded me from what you see on the TV, the big rope chains and this and that, the other. This is really the hardcore money that you can make, the actual numbers. And so when it came time for me to now have my own business, I never really liked working the traditional jobs, right? And I said to myself, I can't see myself working for nobody for the rest of my life. And I always could cut hair, right? I said, let me open my shop. And in 1999, I opened my shop, Soul City. But it still had, of course, I had all the artists, local artists, and artists south of the border, their mixtapes, right? All the DVDs and the black books, the autobiographies, and everything in the store, and the urban clothing. But it still all stemmed from urban street culture, And that's made me want to do it. I didn't want to work that traditional 9 to 5. I want to be a little bit independent, and that's what jump started there.
Why was independence and being independent and self-sufficient, why was that important for you?
Mostly from my father. Hearing, and I never took it to heart when I was younger, but hearing, the black man could do it for himself, or, even though he has university education too, and he's a teacher in the school system, right? He's always did working with youths and stuff like that, right? And community work. But I used to hear that so much, right? Working for yourself and owning your own business and stuff like that. It's not until my late teens and through hip hop, I said, yeah, as an artist, I work for myself. After that kind of passed as a viable option that I might actually be a full-time arts creator, even though I am now, it's come 360, I said to myself, okay, I need to pay rent every 30 days. So even though I have this one foot in the music, how am I going to pay my rent? And I had skills. I had the skills right in my hands, so to speak, right? I was always cutting hair from the 80s, right? But never went to school for it or anything, but I could cut hair good. So when I opened my shop, it was like, it gave me that independence. And I was still felt connected to the community, right? To this day, I had people that was cutting their hair since 5, 6, 7. Then they're graduating college and getting married. I'm still cutting their hair. So it's like, it's crazy when I think of it, right? But yeah, and so it still kept me community oriented, but I was self-sufficient and independent.
What was it like to have products in terms of like, CDs or tapes, pardon me, and autobiographies and selling that in-house? What kind of, it's pretty cool to have that. And what was the response locally in terms of, you go into this barber shop, but you also have access to culture, creative, voices from all over, locally and I'm sure obviously from the US, but also books, and literature, if it's fiction or not. And a lot of this would be not nonfiction, of course. But what was that like? What was the response? Pardon me. What was the response as well locally?
Well, for the music, people ate up the music because people's always looking for music, right? And the mixtape, that mixtape lane, because remember in the 80s, mixtapes wasn't what mixtapes is now, right? And to just give a little...
Please, yeah.
On mixtape. So a mixtape back in the 80s was a guy who's at home who has... Sometimes you could do it from cassettes or you could do it from the vinyl. And he has all these cassettes and all the new, the Big Daddy Kane, the Public Enemy, whatever is out. And a person doesn't have the money to buy every single, you're in your teens, every single album. So a person who's a DJ makes it, but they're official songs from the album. And they make a collage of the thing, blended nicely, or sometimes it's not blended good, but you got like a compilation of songs from all your great artists that you like. But mixtapes evolved into artists themselves that had so much material to get out, and they couldn't get it out because contractually they weren't allowed to get it out in between albums. Contractually, they weren't allowed to do a song with this artist and that artist because the label wouldn't give them the release and the go-ahead. So what they did underground, they released it anyway. So it came its own economy and ecosystem, financial ecosystem, if you will, of mixtapes, right? And us, the consumers, we wanted so much of these artists that we love so much, we couldn't wait 2 years till your new album comes out, Mr. Method Man, Mr. This, or whoever it is, that we would buy these mixtapes. Unofficial albums, of unreleased material, original material on instrumentals, could be other people's instrumentals or original instrumentals that we can buy. So that was sustainable for me, right? The client base, those mixed CDs itself paid some of the rent, like, you know what I mean, of the storefront, right? And mind you, I'm paying two rents. I'm paying the home and I'm paying the storefront, and that alone. The barbershop, of course, everybody wants to look good, you know what I mean? So, but, you know, average, you might get one haircut a month, maybe two, if your hair grows fast enough and you like to look sharp. And then eventually it was just a natural progression because I always had dreams to have another Soul City in the next end, the East End, the West End, but practically I might not get there. So I wanted everything in that location to maximize everything. So a little bit of black hair products. I didn't expand on that too much, but black books, right? And some of the books are love fictional black books, right? Some are about, of course, autobiographies, right? Some are books about artists or anything dealing with the continent of Africa or the Caribbean, you know, the history of these places. And then, and movies, right? Black movies, all the black movies. So that's what it was. And then we added the clothes, right? And then, of course, the youths was male clothes primarily. They're going to eat it up. And it was a base for me too. When I was doing my little mixtapes and I had my album, I could have my spot where I could sell it, you know, as we say, selling out the trunk, but I could sell it there, right? And local artists too. It was a platform. It was a spot for local artists to come, bring your mixtapes on consignment, and you could have it selling there.
Let's tiptoe, if you don't mind, to cinema and film. Tell us the first movie. Tell us about your first movie. What inspired it, and how long did it take from the idea to the actual film? And I apologize if we're jumping all over the place. And if people are listening, I hope you enjoy it, because I'm enjoying this. Yes. Very tangent like conversation.
Yeah. So for me, one of the things I used to do for a long time, I had my DVD magazine, and what that was, there was a period in the 2000s where DVD magazines, there were magazines, but on DVD, on film, right? Packaged up on DVD. And they were big in the States. So you would get exclusive content behind the scenes on music video sets, right? Behind stage, backstage at tour venues, right? This, that, and the other. And with that being said, now that all of that information or all of that content, you could package up on DVD format with the cover and you sell it. And you get exclusive stuff to what's going on in the industry. And this is before YouTube, right? So now, what would happen is I started my DVD magazine. I had two. One it was called XCon TV. It was an acronym that meant Extremely Conscious of Nubian Struggles, right? TV. More for the hardcore hip-hop guys, but showing success stories, guys who probably came out of street life and, doing music or some kind of thing in the arts and they're doing something good, entrepreneurially. Then I had one called Northern Touch DVD, right? And that was a play from the famous song Northern Touch, because I started getting a lot of interview with people who don't want to be associated with a word called ex-cons, right? So when I started seeing that, certain female artists, I created two. And then I used to film and document a lot of parties here in Ottawa.
Oh, you also did nonfiction?
Right. So I'm doing a lot of parties. So like if DJ Mace is throwing a party, he would hire me. I would film his, or take pictures and film his party, and other DJs, and then give him the DVD so he can have something to document, right? And so I had these cameras, and after that ran its course, I said to myself, what am I going to do with all these cameras? But I had a lot of creativity going on in the mind, stories, fictional, this and that, and themes and scenarios. So eventually, it just slowly, I started jotting it down on paper. I took an acting course in high school, just like probably everybody else, right? And it just came to a script, and the first movie was called One Weekend, right? And it was just a slow evolution that I could actually do this. Independent. Remember, I had all the black movies from the States, right? Some of them were low budget, no budget, right? Black movies, but some of them were, good, the Tyler Perry movies and stuff like that. And I got the bug. I said, I could do this myself. And I wrote a script called One Weekend, and it just blew up from there.
Okay. Were you self-taught in terms of the videography when you were covering parties and all that, as far as shooting and editing and post-production? And this is in the late 90s, right?
Right. So, no, I was self-taught, but I've been on music video sets in the early 90s too. right? There was a couple of music videos we did. We did music videos with Rogers TV, impromptu kind of music videos with Rogers TV, right? In the groups that I was involved in as a hip hop artist, we did our own music videos. So, but those videos, there were low budget videos, but they were still music videos. And remember, I was that kind of young man that I'm always soaking up. When I'm on any environment, I'm soaking up mannerisms, the language of, the actual equipment, the name of equipment, peaking. What's the name of that? What's that lens? And, for whatever reason, I was that kind of youth. I was always inquisitive, right? And hence I always wanted to be beside Wally, right? So with all that experience, I just self-taught at first. I didn't know what I was doing with the first movie. And it came out decent. Even as a low-budget movie, it came out decent. And it's something dear to my heart, but I knew to myself, I want to get it done now. I can go back to school later, but let me get this done now, right? Because I'm also thinking about time is not on my hand, right? Because time has passed, and I don't want time to slip through me, right? And I have all these things that I wish I should have, could have, would have, did. Let me get it done, and I'll learn and progress as future comes. And so it was a good movie. It was low budget, but the thing that holds my heart dear to that movie, it was the last major movie done by Louis Rankin, right? The Jamaican dancehall artist, right? Who's passed away now. He passed away during COVID, right? Or right before COVID, right? He passed away in a car accident outside of somewhere in Southern Ontario, right? And of course he did Belly and Shutters, right? So, and I had him in my movie, right? And that was the last major production that he did. And so that's what made me realize I could do it. And I just, on a whim, I just emailed him one day. And I said, I want that guy, you know what I mean? And I've been following him since the 80s. I know his reggae dancehall career. And I just went to his contact and I emailed him and hollered at him. And he said, what's your budget? And I said, this is my budget. He said, it's my first project. He read the script. He says, I'll cut my price in half for you. I said, what? And he just came on board. And we did it.
Do you still have all your films? I think you've done 4 or 5. How many movies have you done?
3 so far.
Okay.
Working on the 4th.
In terms of all these films and also your party documentary, do you still have access to all this archival material from way back in the day?
Oh, yeah. I have plenty external drives at home. So I have all the external drives from when external drives were 500 gigabytes, and that was like nearly $200. I have that one still at home, right? I have like now 600 gigabyte external drives, like, you know what I'm saying? Or terabytes, sorry. So yes, 600 terabytes right now, right? So
fascinating. Are you planning down the road to? Because I mean, if you have that sort of footage, you can also do like, kind of a documentary of Ottawa's, urban culture back now almost 30 years ago, right? Because you know what I'm saying? Like there's so much there. Is there a thought of doing something like that?
Yeah, there's one. It's halfway in production right now. I'm into grant writing, right? So I've gotten a grant and I've been commissioned to document, and I'm doing it in different part series. So I'm doing Ottawa's hip hop scene from '82 to '92, that 10-year period, right? And so that's it's halfway. There's a couple more little editing touch-ups we got to do, and a couple more people we're trying to tie down. I have in contact with them, but they're in Toronto now. But these are instrumental people that's needed for the documentary. But so that's been in the process for the last year.
That's incredible because it's stories like that sort of content that really tells us the history, and it's more important now than ever because when people look at the current ecosystem, the question, at least for someone like myself, is what was there before? We kind of want to know the background. And for someone like yourself who's been around for so long, you have insight into that, and you have access to all this content. May I ask, do you work solo or do you work with others? Well, how do you approach the filmmaking process? How has it evolved now that you're 3 films in, as far as
When I first started working, I was working by myself, right? And so, and I wanted to work by myself because I'm kind of a person where I felt like, hey, I don't want no conflict with anybody with the direction, right? I could partner with somebody, but if I do partner with somebody, you have to understand that, you know what I mean? Let me direct, you know what I mean? And you could be, you know what I mean? I don't like this word, but a subordinate, if you will, right? But But let me direct because I'm very serious about art and how the direction of art, especially if we're talking about documenting something. And I'm a little exuberant with it, but I take hip hop culture as a culture in the real sense of the word as culture, right? So we got to be careful with this when we document, right? Because there's always people who's going to come up, well, I want to add this piece, and you don't know so-and-so DJ was alive, and this and that, and somebody came out before this person 2 years prior to this, and there's always going to be that, right? When you come into people getting their flowers and people putting the proper place in the puzzle chronologically, right? So, but now I've grown from that, and I have partnered with people. So I have my own film company, right? It's called Northern Touch Films, but I also have another company, right? It's called Three Brother Films, where I partner with two other brothers. And I did that so when I'm working on certain projects, Three Brother Films could do these projects. But when I'm working on certain other projects, Northern Touch is going to handle these kind of projects.
Now, it's interesting because, sorry, did you need to take that?
Go ahead. No.
So it's interesting because, there's the visual storytelling that you do as a filmmaker. Then there's obviously the music. Hip hop culture is all encompassing in all of this, right? As far as from music production to emceeing to writing, but also telling stories in the form of fiction and nonfiction films. But in addition to that, it's interesting too because I remember one time I bumped into you and you were talking about launching a festival, right, in Hintonburg at La Roche Park. Yeah. And I remember thinking, I'm like, it's in, and this is me thinking in hindsight, what's the word? What am I looking for? What's the word? Sorry, I'm losing my word. But like, you always, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a bold visionary. It's fair to say because I'm like, I remember you're saying, I'm thinking of launching a festival, right?
Yes.
And not a lot of people do that. Not a lot of people think big and also put in the work and execute because there's a lot of groundwork that we're not even fully diving into it. What motivated this idea of creating a festival, a big one? I attended it.
Okay. Well, I just wanted
fair representation the way I said.
Yes, definitely. So my personal inspiration was for it because there's a lot of festivals in Ottawa that was happening, right? But not a lot was very viable that local artists could get on those stages and platforms, right? The biggest one we had was Blues Festival. We have, right? There was the urban music festival that Wally used to do in the early 2000s, right? Late 90s, early 2000s. There was that's no longer. But there's also the I'm pulling a blank here. But Blues Fest had bought them out, right? There was a folk festival.
Right.
There was the folk festival, right? And Blues Fest bought them out. So a lot of that enough said there. But for the local artists, those festivals are definitely festivals, but they're festivals that is concerned with, and this is not a shade or in a bad way. I'm saying this, right? But they're capitalistic ventures, right? So as a capitalistic venture, you need what's going to make you the most capital. And so with that being said, they're concentrated on headliners from the States and this and that, the other. So it's going to be a hard sell to put a local person on when you're not going to have a lot of people coming through those gates, right? So now Blues Fest does have one of the stages that they give a platform to local artists, but that's not their most money-making night, right? And I can see why. So that's why I said there's no shade on them for that. But where does the artist locally get the platform to bust their craft and do their stuff? And that's what I wanted to start. Definitely, I would like to grow to the point where I'm getting big headliners from the States, but I'm not, concentrating on that. Or even big headliners from Canada, right? I'm concentrating on locally supporting our local, indigenous, talent that we have here in Canada, right? And so that's what that was my mindset going into the Soul City Festival.
May I ask, can you kind of break it down to us? What are some of the big challenges in launching such a festival for people who have never organized anything and in terms of major large events? Break it down as far as administratively, what happens.
Yeah. Well, one of the things is that One, people always looking at finance and where they're going to get the money from. So a lot of people goes for the grants. For the first, actually, we only started getting real grants like 2 years ago, right? But it was in the middle of COVID, and the festival had to restructure itself because LaRouche Park is under construction. They demolished the old building, the community center, built a new one. They tore up the baseball diamonds, right, and the grass. So we had to shuffle around, but we're going to go back to the grounds there next year, right? But our thing was to try to be independent. How could we do this with not necessarily going for the big grants, right? But going for the sponsorships and charge and keeping it free. That was one thing about our festival too, keeping it free as giving back to the community. It was challenging, right? But the other challenging thing is to having people, volunteers or people who want to be a part of the team and staff that would see your vision and understand that, listen, we're doing this and we're doing this to give back to the community, but we're not doing this and everybody's going to have a big payday, right? But down the road, we'll have a big payday, right? And having people who want to stay on board for the long haul. Or people who just wants to say, nah, listen, I'll help you, I'll be on board, but who you got coming this year? You know what I'm saying? And that was a challenging thing. And, you know, there's a lot of moving parts, so people who want to be able to work with you in that capacity, but people who know how to work with others, right? That's another challenging thing, because sometimes you have different departments and they're good at what they do, but they don't know how to talk to people and make people follow them without maybe getting upset, yelling, or this or that, the other. So it's been challenging, but that's one of the biggest things I see that I had to take on, right? All the different moving parts and see how I keep everything running smoothly.
As someone who's been involved in the scene here, in the creative ecosystem, the Black Ottawa Gatineau scene and community, what, and over the decades, how has it evolved, and what do you think of the current state of the ecosystem? Is it thriving? Is it not reaching its potential? What first, how would you describe it, and what would you like to see more of from this community?
Oh, I have so much to say on that. Well, one, Ottawa has grown since then, right? That time when I moved to Ottawa was about, like I said, 35,000 black people. Now, Ottawa has, as today, 84,700 black people, right? But we not only want black people to come to our events, right? We want anybody to come to our events, okay? So how do we do that, right? And reaching out to the masses in Ottawa. It's still the same. Ottawa is a unique city where Ottawa doesn't have the regional pride. And people might argue with this with me, but it doesn't have the regional pride that other cities have. Torontonians are proud to be Torontonians. Hence, you can look at any music video, hip-hop and R&B, and see Torontonians wearing Toronto Blue Jays hat, T-shirts, right? Have songs about their city, right? You have to pull...
Captain, how do we fix that? How do we address that?
Well, I think it's an identity, the identity of Ottawa. We're just not proud. We would define ourselves as Somalian, Jamaican, before we define ourselves that we're from Ottawa, right? Or I've seen artists who's made some success. When you try to ask them, you have to pull teeth for them to say, I'm from Ottawa, and be proud of that, because of the perception that other cities might have in the bigger markets, what Ottawa is like, right? Montrealers are proud to be from Montreal. That hurts the local scene. It hurts the local scene in the sense when these artists are putting on events and trying to do their stuff, other artists in the people community don't even go to support them. They look at them as like, you're doing art and I'm doing art, you might be my competition. I don't think you're hot like that. And they don't support. But you support big headlining artists coming from the US. I get it. But you have to have regional homegrown pride, right? And that's an identity crisis that is hard to beat, and it hasn't really changed, right? People think it's changed, but that perception is only because population has grown a little bit, right? But we still don't have that homegrown pride, and it hurts the whole business of art as a whole. Doesn't matter if it's a spoken word poetry event, there was a time, early 90s and mid 90s, you had a spoken word poetry event. The venue, whatever venue was ram-packed. Now, you have to give away tickets, almost. You know what I'm saying? You have to discount tickets and this and that because people don't feel the vibe like that. And it hurts. It hurts, the whole ecosystem.
let's say the scenario was you had unlimited resources with the mission and goal to change within your particular target audience that you know well, you know the behavioral spending habits, and you had all the data you needed and a team to work on. And let's say you wanted to target one particular audience and get them to have some pride in Ottawa and its talent.
Right.
How would you approach it?
Oh, that's multivariate answer. Okay, so I can give an example how one community has done it and other communities hasn't. During COVID, there was the Afro Fest, right, that started up. I think there's two. One African festival or Afro Beats Festival, and one is Afro Fest or whatever. They keep it down at Mooney's Bay. And within the first year, the inception, thousands upon thousands of people. Well, Africa does have a large African, community, right? From the continent, from Central Africa to West Africa, who listens to Afro beats, right? And they turn out. They turned out for that festival. Like the first year, it's like a sea of people. We've been trying to do this with the Reggae Fest, the Jam Day, Jamaica Day, Reggae Festival. 1 or 2 years good, but then tail is off, right? We've been trying to do this for Hiphop Festival, right? R&B stuff, spoken word, and it doesn't get the support like I've seen this. It's mind-blowing, but I realize what's happening with African as a continent. It's just their time now in history, right? That we're putting a lot of spotlight on Africans' time, right? And it's their time to rise. Doesn't matter if it's East Africa, West Africa, South Africa. Africa's getting a spotlight. And Africans are feeling proud to be in. It's not that dark continent as it was before. So because of that, they're representing, and anything African, they're showing out. You understand what I'm saying? But for us from Caribbean descent, it's your Haitian thing. You understand? It's your St. Vincent thing.
If I were to counter, and I hear you on that, but if I were to counter and say, well, what about Caravana and its, the legendary festival in terms of drawing people out, and it's a huge uniting event for the Caribbean and South America as well. What would you say to that?
I would say, well, Caravana had a big head start, right? You know what I mean? Started in 69, I think, if I remember correctly, right? Started in 69, so it had a big head start. And it started at a time where people of Caribbean descent in Toronto were more unified. You understand what I'm saying? So now it's blown. It's the biggest one in the West, right? Other than Brazil, you know what I'm saying? But it's the biggest one. Brazil one is homogeneous to Brazilians going to their festival, but people coming from England and all over the diaspora to the Toronto one. It's bigger than the New York one and the Miami one. And it just started at that time. In 69, there was a lot of consciousness in the air, you know what I'm saying, about where we are as black people in the West. And so that helped it a lot. So now it's no turning back. It's the McDonald's of Caribbean festivals, it's the first, right? So it's the golden arches of festivals. So that's a unique thing. And yes, we could try to get that here, but I do believe certain markets and certain cities produces certain mentalities. Like, if you go to New York, it's a dog-eat-dog city. Ottawa is very conservative. We're conservative how we spend our money. We're conservative about, where we do things and how we project ourselves, right? And that has a play in it also.
Man, this topic alone, we can spend hours on. It's fascinating because here we are right now. For folks who don't know, we're at the NAC. That stands for the National Arts Center, and there's some events that are about to start soon. An audience is very important, right? You need an audience in order to put on an event and celebrate it. What are your thoughts, if you don't mind, real quickly? Let's keep talking about this. Kind of wrap up the circle in terms of Ottawa as an audience. Well, what is this city like for creative entrepreneurs who put on festivals and all things creative? Well, what is it like?
Well, from my perspective of what I see, and I believe I'm spot on because I've seen a lot, right? It's very hard for the artists themselves to keep up the morale unless they feel they have to move, right, to a different city. Most likely Toronto, right? And some just didn't move. But to monetize and take the art and make it an entrepreneurial thing, make a sustainable living, right? It's very hard. Toronto has so much artists that just they're more realistic and they're more hopeful of monetizing the art because they had big stars from, the Cardinal officials and those people and Drakes that's come out of Toronto. So you see a lot of people from from Toronto making moves in the U.S. And Ottawa, it's like we feel like it's not viable option, right, for us to break past this glass ceiling of breaking out of Ottawa. So one thing I would say to Ottawa artists is you have to learn the business, right, of monetizing, right, and you have to be realistic. Do you want to be rich like Drake? Who doesn't? He has a couple $100 million in the bank account. Everybody would like. Is that probable or possible? Anything is possible, not probable. But here what I would say for the good mental health too of artists of artists in Ottawa and in the Canadian landscape, because I teach this with the Origin Arts Community Center to young artists. I would say be more realistic on how you want to make a living. Not trying to say you could make $100 million, because that's only a few. Even in the Whitney Houstons and the James Browns and all of them, there's only that 1% of all the artists that has came out Motown era. You can watch 1,001 documentaries of a person who's living in a one-bedroom apartment who's a superstar in the 60s. Or somebody who's known, like, you know what I'm trying to say? And we don't get that. But you see that one Bruce Springsteen, or that one, you know what I mean, Rolling Stones, and you think it's possible for everybody, right? So you want to be a viable working artist that makes a living. Something that will pay your rent, something that can help you buy a house, maybe, in Canada, and raise children. That is plausible and possible for everybody, right? Instead of having grandeur, you know what I'm saying? Aspirations. Have the aspirations, but understand, is it logical? So logical now is to monthly, how do you get yourself booked for shows? The music business hasn't changed for the last 10,000 years. You perform for the pharaoh, give you a couple knuckles of gold, from the next city to the next city, from the chief to the Caesar, the prince, whoever it is, and your talents go far and wide through word of mouth. How do you get booked for shows? And it's through having merchandise to sell. The glitz and glamour in the music video and all that is nice, and I get it. I'm speaking to people on deaf ears when I say that, but you want to get booked for shows and you want to have merchandise to sell, right? And once you have those two components, right, you will be all right. And understanding that the music business, the structure of the music business is lopsided in its equity and always has been, right? Because that's an equity thing in itself, right? The label. I'm speaking of in this aspect. Or if it's different type of art, the corporation or whatever, right? In the movie business, it's lopsided, right? But you, as the person who has the talent, you can monetize your art for a fair price that somebody likes your art and they will buy it for a particular price. Once the price is fair in the open market.
It's fascinating because in addition to being a creator, you're coaching and mentoring a new generation of artists as well at the Origins. Tell us about Origins, why you all started it, and give us the origin story on the Origins.
It started 10 years ago, right? In the inception.
In a decade already.
It's been a decade. This is our 10-year anniversary. Well, the concept of it started about 11 years ago, right? But the actual opening up of the business, the spot, 10 years, right? And it was started by myself, Jackie Detroit, and Just Jamal the Poet, right? And we wanted a hub and a space where people come. It's a rental center, right? So you can come, rent it out for rehearsals, small shows, this and that, album release parties, whatever you want to do. But it's a hub where you can come and practice your art, right? It's a meeting space where we can actually do our own programming, right? And put programming out there, giving back to the community and stuff like that. We opened up as a business. We got a nonprofit status in 2019, and we just kept it moving ever since. And some of the stuff that I teach, when I teach with youths about the music business and hip hop, I teach these kinds of things, right? Because I do make a connection between mental health and art, right? Art being a thing that can heal mental health issues, but art also has been damaging for mental health too. As we've seen, there's no shortage of superstars who went off the rocks, right? You know what I'm saying? From the 50s, 60s, and 70s. We all know those stories, those damaging stories. Through art, making them go wild, right? But art could also be healing, right? If you use it properly. So, and that's what it is. And we're in a time where everybody's talking about equity, because we know the injustices what a lot of these corporations have done. the predatory kind of contractual practices they've had, right? You know,
Creative exploitation. Essentially.
yeah, that's a nice word. I like that one. Creative exploitation, right? The owning of your art, the owning of your, you know what I'm saying?
Intellectual property
Intellectual property. That's the word. Yeah, you know. But that was vital to now. Record labels are still 2 steps ahead of us, right? And I don't know how much time you got, but you know,
I'm enjoying this. You keep dropping some knowledge. This is fascinating.
Because we're in a space where everybody thought it was good that there's no record labels no more. Well, there's still record labels, but it's kind of taken a few steps notches down because YouTube, because now the middleman we don't have to go through the middleman, and it's good. But what I've noticed and what I've seen primarily, not in all cases, because everything's absolute, but all that did is gave us creative control over our art. Mm-hmm. But now it's harder for artists to break without the traditional record label. It's harder for the artist to break if he doesn't have an agent and he's trying to get into the movies, right? It's harder. So now what happens is we have these corporations, these streaming platforms that pay you a quarter of a cent or a half a cent or 1/10 of a cent after whatever hundreds of thousands of views you got to get 1 cent in pay or 10 cents. It's like, it's crazy. We're more exploited, but we have creative control. You understand what I'm saying?
It's almost like a trade-off.
It's a trade-off. We have creative control. We all know somebody has a DSLR camera that can make a video of us, a music video, put it on YouTube and leave it up to the wind. But it doesn't turn into, right, sustainable, viable livelihood. You get 1,000 views, 1,500 views, 6,000 views, 7,000 views, right? But yeah, somebody could see it in China, but you ain't gonna get booked in China, right? Because you don't have the same traditional ways of how we always want it to be. You have to have a top 10 hit, right? You have to be known by the masses, and people want to book you for your star power. The promoter wants to say, in Illinois, in Miami, this person from Toronto, if I book them in my venue, would people come back out and I make my money from this particular person? No matter what your YouTube things say. So now the gap between the elite and the local artist who might have good talent, right, who hasn't broken the glass ceiling or touched it, is more spread wide open, right?
I gotta ask you this question: how receptive are these young artists to this, to this free knowledge you're dropping? Because it's especially at the grassroots level, because you're at the origins and you're engaging with a whole new community, and as you mentioned, they're seeing the big 100 million, but you're telling them key fundamentals that are actually transferable to anything. Yes. In terms of business, core business principles and mindset. How receptive are they, and how do you communicate to a demographic that is they're very, very young, and they're very, and I don't say that, and very inexperienced, but possibly, maybe they have some technical skills and knowledge on the digital side, which is fantastic, I would imagine, because they've grown up with the internet, this, that, and the other. But as far as them being receptive, how do you communicate to that audience? How do you connect with them? And how receptive are they to the overall message?
For a lot of them, it falls on deaf ears, right? They'll listen to me. And they say, yes, Cap. Yes, Unc. We got you. I've been getting that a lot these days. Yes, Unc. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know how I feel about that word, but yeah. But at the same time, I'm fighting against, it's like a David and Goliath here, because from what they see, social media, right, and what they see that is plausible, but not necessarily practical in as far as the dollar and cents goes. So I try to tell them like this. You're going to go pay a producer here in Ottawa, right? Pay a producer, give him X amount of money. He's going to, after you pay the producer, you're going to go to some studio here in Ottawa, pay the money to record the song. Then after that, you got to pay it to get mastered. And then you're going to put it and give it away for free. Then you're going to find some guy and pay him some money to go make a music video. And you recoup nothing for your art, right? Nothing that's sustainable to the equal value what you think the price should be for that song, right? So, in the hopes of you finally do get enough traction that you start getting books for shows, right? It's a backward entry. You know what I mean? You're moving backwards into, and I understand the music business has, like we said, you know what I mean, taking advantage of us. I can't remember the term you used, but exploitation, right? And I understand that. But if you look at anybody else who's big, who's so-called independents, they eventually did partner with some kind of record label, some type of distribution label, some type of distribution platform. It's the nature of the business, right? Unless you're just cool with just being underneath this glass ceiling, right? So that's what's happening there. So with that being said, I was in the process of writing this book. It was called How to Make $100,000 a Year in Canada Off of Your Art. And it was primarily for hip-hop artists, but you can apply it to anything, right?
When were you going to write this?
It's in the process of being written.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was sitting down, this was during COVID, and we had, with all the social distancing and the opening and the closing of the different mandates, when it opened up a little bit, this was 2022, Black History Month. There was an event at the Origin. I wasn't there at the time. I was at my shop in the Origin. And my brother phones me and says, yo, text me, come down to the shop right now. Farley Flex is here. So you know what Farley Flex is?
Yes.
Farley Flex, right? Canada's premier music manager, right? And businessman. He was the manager for many artists back in the early 90s and late 80s. Most notably, Maestro Fresh West, right? First manager. And I know him personally because we were on tour with them, right? From back then. I haven't seen him since 92. Haven't seen this person. But when my brother was there, my brothers told him, yo, you know my brother, my older brother, with Ground Control, this and that, the other. Yeah, I know them. Tell him to come down now. I'm chopping it up with him. I get there, he instantaneously recognizes me. I have these nose rings since '89, so he remembers me. We start chopping it up, and I'm telling him about this book that I said, these young artists, they can make $100,000 a year. And if you make $100,000 a year, you know you're in the top 9% for the males. You're in the top 9% of 9% of men. Only 9% of men or more make $100,000 a year in Canada.
Is that before or after tax?
Probably before taxes. Yeah, before taxes, right? Before taxes. But, right? It's only 14% that make over $100,000 a year. And it raised up to like 22 because, you know what I mean, during COVID, and some people lost their job. But it's back down to about 14% of men who make $100,000 a year or over in Canada. If you make that as a young artist, you're doing good. You know what he told me? He said to me, what are you talking about? He says, you can make $400,000 a year in Canada. Now, this is somebody who we know knows what he's talking about. So he says, you're right, $100,000 is probable, right? But you could make $400,000 a year. But he says, most artists are not going to make that. Because you know why? You need two things. You have to go back to doing the same thing as we always do. You have to do shows, and you have to have merchandise. The same thing I've been saying. So artists are doing shows, but instead of finishing the show and say, hey, come meet me over the table over there. I got some merchandise. I have my CDs and this and that, the other. They're not doing that. So the young artists are saying CDs are obsolete. They're not obsolete. And that's part of the books. The stats, I have the books.
Wait a minute. So you're saying CDs are still, in terms
Viable.
of it?
As a source of income. It's still viable, right? It's still viable. 62% of the cars that are on the road right now, right, in Canada, still have CD players in it. Because people don't buy brand new cars like that. We don't, unless you're above middle class. You might finance, but most people's cars still have CD players in it. And if your demographics is selling music to people who are 29 and up, the cars, they would buy a CD. How do I know that? Because I'm still selling mixtapes right now.
You're still selling mixtapes?
CDs now they call it, but mixtapes is the original word, right? People still selling CDs. I'm putting it in the car. Disposable. After 2 months, it gets scratched. Come buy another one. $5. Come back. You understand what I'm saying? So if you understand your market, it's not obsolete. And if it's obsolete, it's a portion of your income that you could sell. More than just giving it away on some platform for free. You understand?
Absolutely.
So, and he told me that $400,000 you can make. And so when Farley Flex speaks, I'm not doubting him at all. And he told me that 3 years ago.
That's 4 times the amount, 400,000, right?
He told me you're going to have to work hard. And a lot of these artists don't want to do that hard work. They feel funny of selling their own CDs, their T-shirts, and their hats. They feel funny about it. They want to go on stage, get the fame and glory, get the views and the likes and the clicks, but that hard grinding work, they don't want to do it.
Well, you've been at it for a long time, and you know you framed it from the top of this interview here. You spoke about wanting to work for yourself, the importance to be autonomous and independent, and also having that independent creative spirit, and now being able to convert it converting that creativity into money and providing services to the community. Yesterday or before yesterday, I was thinking about this interview, and I was like, we need to almost redefine. Maybe it's more maturity on how people think of success. But like when I think of success, I'm like, you're a success story. You are, because you're independent. You work for yourself. You run your own businesses, and you have that independence to tell your stories. Recently you also you were, I think, awarded by the Cranium Festival here. Let me tell us about that. You were awarded. I want to hear about that. But actually, and before we even do that, my brain's just going everywhere. Tell us about the play. How did you pivot from visual storytelling in terms of fiction to transitioning into theater? What inspired that? And I believe I heard you guys on the radio, CBC Ottawa, I believe it was In Town and Out. It plays on the weekends. I think it was on a Sunday. Yes, it was Sunday morning. And the problem was, my reaction was like, damn it, I'm going to miss this event. And I was like, and I'm like, this guy, and I'm thinking to myself, this friggin' guy is so versatile. You're like a creative chameleon in any milieu. You can thrive and create, which that versatility, it's fascinating. Not all artists can do that. I'm not just bigging you up here. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's for real. Like, when you think about it, name any other local artist, who's been around this long as you. Yes, I'm calling you old, but it's old in a good way, because you're a survivor. You survive all the different eras, still creating, still independent, still upholding your creative mission. I think that is success, man. You know what I'm saying? And you have, you know what I'm saying? So let's take it to the before we talk about the award, talk to us about what inspired theater. Because yes, please.
Okay. I'm gonna answer the first question about success though first. Of course, I like knowledge, right? I'm a person who loves knowledge, and using knowledge to apply it to anything I want to do. I've been using the word success my whole life, right? But sometimes we take for granted. You don't know the real etymology of words sometimes, and we don't know the real meaning and the context of words. When you look it up, success doesn't mean the financial dividends. A lot of people translate it like that, right? The financial or whatever dividends you think monetarily that comes out of something.
We tend to frame it from that.
Right, from that perspective. Success means finishing something to completion that you started.
Wow.
That's what it actually means. And we've used the word success in those things. You might say, I built the sandcastle on the beach successfully, or, I successfully completed, But we never frame it in that. And that's the groundedness. Success means you started something and you finished it to completion. That's the first meaning of the word success. Then it has other meanings. So now you're talking about transferring to being around so long.
Yes, in terms of going from all
to
of these
film.
to go from film to theater now.
Yes.
You're writing a script and you put on a play in November.
Yeah.
Tell us about that transition. What inspired it and how it performed here in Ottawa.
I've always loved film, right? And I always loved theater at the same time, right? I did a couple of theater stuff in junior high school and in high school, right? But I never got back around to it because one thing
Black folks do theater?
I know.
Oh, they do.
They do. But at the same time, I always thought that theater was this kind of thing where, of course, we do have a lot of theater. There's the Chitlin circuit in the States, right? That mom and pop type of theater, right? And we have that in the Caribbean too. Then we have those theaters like Cats and stuff like that. But I always looked at theaters like, that's not our stuff, right? Ignorantly, I was thinking that's like, different. That was for Caucasian folks going to these big amphitheaters and, with the balcony seats and stuff like that, watching a play. Nah, that's not for us. But then with the creativity I have, I said to myself, And I was inspired by Tyler Perry. Because Tyler Perry, all of his movies are stage plays first. Then he does this the Chitlin circuit, he does the theaters and stuff like that. Then after, when he does that run for like about a year and a half, then he turns it to a film. So he already has the script laid out. You understand? So I said to myself, I have so much different scenarios. I have 12 scripts written right now, just waiting. I don't have the money for all of them, but I have the, you know what I mean?
Wait, they're completed?
Completed. 12 scripts written. And then when COVID came, I made the transition because since 1999 I opened my shop, I said, let me pivot during COVID and become a full-time arts creator, right? So I started writing grants, right? And I got some grants, right? And so I got some grants for the play. So now I got the grant. I'm like, damn, I didn't think I'd get it. So the play is sitting here. So now I really got to put on the play. I thought I would got turned down, right?
Why is that?
I've written grants before, but I didn't think I'll get it for whatever reason. I don't know why, but I just said, nah, they're not going to give me for this play, you know? It's a little bit gritty, the subject matter of the play, right? I was like, they ain't going to, you know? And I messed around and I got it.
Maybe it's original. Maybe they looked at it and said, oh, like, oh, damn, we've never seen this story told before.
Right.
Can you tell us about the play?
The play is called Rap Star, and it's a little bit based on my life and a little bit based on another artist, a local artist here in Ottawa by the name of Monfu, right? And it's about Monfu, the last weekend before he is getting released from jail, right? He is in his cell and getting advice from me, who's an older hip-hop head, trying to give him advice, because he only been in for a couple months, right, of how he should conduct himself going forward with the music. And I'm telling him about hip-hop back in our day, and he's telling me the market in these days is different, right? And I'm giving him advice before Monday comes and he gets released. And that's what the play is about. But it's a musical type of play because throughout the play, there's musical performances from Monfu and myself, right?
How did Ottawa respond to that? And unfortunately, I missed that.
Yes.
I was on the way. I think I was out. I was going to miss it because I was out of town. There was something taking me out of town.
Okay.
And I was very annoyed by that because I'm like, man, this is, you know, I like theater. I always like theater. We're here at the NAC. I come here and check out plays, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. But and that story and whatnot, I'm sure would resonate with many because as we grow older, maybe we become more open to different, you know, forms of entertainment. You know, I can't be going to the nightclub. You know, some do. Not wrong with that. But like, in terms of how did Ottawa respond to it, and will we be seeing more plays?
Oh yes, the response was nice, right? Because it was my first play, right? I was going in there thinking everything would go just because I micro manage everything, right? And I nitpick at everything in rehearsals. And we did have some technical difficulties, some audio technical difficulties going wrong a little bit, right? That happened in the play. But we fixed it because we went back with the performances at the end of the play and redid the performances for the crowd, right? It was a technical thing, and this technical thing does happen sometimes in these performance rooms, right? These amphitheaters. So, but other than that, and it was a learning process for me. It went good. I loved it. And we did the play, which we didn't know when I booked the venue. We did it on the same day as the Canada's Santa Claus parade, right? So that was a learning curve. Now look months in advance, right? You know what I mean? If it's not going to be having no parade, so some people couldn't attend, but it was nicely attended, right? And we're bringing it back and giving it another run, like a 2-week run. Right here in Ottawa.
When is this?
It's going to be sometime in the summer. We have a lot of things going on, but it's going to be sometime in the summer, and we're looking at taking it on the road to different cities.
Man, how do you find time for all of this magic and you know, from writing, from ideation, from like, how do you find time? Do you have like a clone of yourself that works while you're sleeping or something?
Well, one of the things is for me, because of some of the mistakes I made with thinking I had a lot of time when I was a younger artist and time slipped through me, right, or slipped past me. I'm trying to make up for that time, and I realize when it comes to art, you know, you got to get it out there. Why store it all until you pass away? You know, I don't want that. I want it to get out to the masses. When I pass, my children or somebody else could have the copyrights to it and they can monetize it in some way, right? But get it out there. Get it out there, register it, do whatever you got to do, but get the art out there and don't let time, pass you. So that's one of the urgencies with me. But at the same time, I just love to be busy too. And my life has taken a change now with COVID coming, right? It's coming as a full-time artist. So I still have the Soul City as the location, right? It's no longer. The building got sold during COVID, right? But I still have Soul City as a pop-up and doing home calls and stuff like that. I still sell the mix CDs and stuff like that. But the origin is the base. As a full-time arts creator, I have to create, right?
Fascinating, man. You know what? We're here. It's getting very loud and busy. We're almost 80 minutes into it. I have maybe two more questions for you, if you don't mind. I want to talk about you were recognized at the 3rd annual Recognize Award, which was organized by Cap City Hiphop and Cranium Arts Project. You were let me read this real quick here. You were recognized. They recognized Captain for the Foundation Prize. Tell us about this prize and what it means to you to be recognized by this community here in Ottawa of creatives and movers and shakers. Well, what does that mean to you?
I like that. I like that award. Definitely, I like it for specific reasons. I like organizations, right, that are more grassroots, right? Like if it's an organization like the Junos and those kinds of organizations on those levels, those are nice, you know what I'm saying? No shade, but but when organizations are grassroots, because I come from that whole ethos myself, right? Being my father, being an activist from back in the days. So I have that going through my system. So when an organization is grassroots, the mentality is more grassroots, right? I expect certain things from that kind of organization. Certain things that I expect for them to give back to the community, right? Certain things I expect them to look for in their principles and their mandates. You understand? So when I look at it and say to give me the Foundation Award, well, the name alone is fitting, right? You know what I'm saying? As the Foundation Award. So that alone I'm pleased with. And I'm pleased with it because I'm still here. I'm still doing things, right? And I'm still doing things that are relevant and still making a living for myself doing things. So it's like, yeah, I'm glad to still be, you know what I mean, still rocking and still flexing with some of the young youths, because as a matter of fact, nearly, I would say 80% of all artists that is doing things either at the Cranium Festival or this festival or Blues Festival, wherever, these young artists has passed through the origin. And I'm literally not lying about it. As either they've rehearsed, rented it out for rehearsal space, they practice their rhymes or their poetry, they've come to visit other artists performing and doing their shows. So with that being said, it's like, yeah, I'm still helping the next generation do their thing, directly or indirectly.
Two more questions, actually. In terms of artificial intelligence, the future of technology and that's how it's impacting creatives, how have you dabbled in that, or have you dabbled? Yes, no, why? To tell us about that.
No,
and in terms of just broadly speaking technology, because you're someone, it sounds to me like you've got your foot in many different landscapes, and you've got your ear to the ground, but you're also looking up. You know, you're all over the place, but you're aware of what's happening.
For me, if you're going to use any kind of AI technology for your art, I do understand. If you for the younger generation, I understand. Hey, you can go to school and take this 2-year course on photography or film editing, right? And spend, you know what I mean, a couple $1,000s, well, maybe $10,000 on this program or whatever it is, right? And time out of your life, right? And might set you behind the clock, so to speak. Or you can go to this AI program, upload your thing, and they do it for you, right? It's a cheat code, but you can't fight technology. Technology is coming and it's moving fast and moving rapidly. It does take a hit, though, on the brain power, right? Because I think you get the best dividends from using this, right? Your brain. I'm pointing to my brain right now. But using your brain power, because I'm a very spiritual person too, I think the universe, God, right? If people don't believe in God or whatever, or the universe gives you back the dividends from the energy you put out there. But if you don't do it through using this, the Most High is not going to give you, because the Most High is going to be like, nah, you know, you cheating, right? But we're going to use AI or some kind of technology to a certain extent. but I would rather see people have their own creativity, right? And then you can be proud of it and pump your chest and beat your chest and slap yourself on the back or pat yourself on the back and saying, yeah, that's my work, right? And I deserve all of that because I did the sound, I did the levels, I did the EQ, and I did everything myself. And now I get that financial reward too because of it, right? And people loved it.
Now, what are you working on next? Where can we follow and stay informed as to your next projects and so on?
I got another movie coming out. I got my third movie. Is going to be. We did a screening, but now we're going to do an official premiere. Right? We did one last summer. It's called The Truth. That was my third movie. We're going to do it again, starting probably 2 months from now. Just waiting on the final trailer to be done, and then we're ready to go. And I'm going to be screening it here, the Ottawa, theaters. Probably the Ottawa Library, smaller theaters. We did screen it at the Silver City Scotiabank Theater last year, but we're going to scale it down a little bit. Very expensive. We don't get distribution. So, and we're going to have that running for about a good 2 weeks. After that, in about September, I'm going to start my fourth movie. And it's a kind of like 50 Shades of Black, as I like to call it, right? Other than 50 Shades of Grey, right? It's a very sensual movie, right? About a marriage couple that's having problems in their love life, right? And stuff like that, and how black marriage couples deals with these issues, right? So that's what that's going to be going on. And then I still got I got the Origin Kitchen concerts. I got a lot of series coming up there, right? Check me out, the Origin Arts and Community Center, right, on Instagram, right? I don't update that as much as my own Instagrams, which is Soul City Store. Just one word, Soul City Store.
And from there, we can find out the screening of these films.
You'll find everything there. Soul City Store, or if you go to Northern Touch Films on Facebook, right? Or Soul City Music Fest on Facebook, But I'm all over there. My number is very accessible, right? You'll see my number posted all the time. I don't hide my phone number, And people can get in touch with me and just hit me up and see what we got going on.
Thank you very much for your time. I have one last question for you. What advice would you give to anyone who wants to follow in your footsteps, in terms of being creative and having this endurance and this desire to continuously create, innovate, and uplift the community?
Don't get discouraged, right? Don't get discouraged. It's not going to come. Rome wasn't built in a day. It sounds cliche to say that, but don't get discouraged and stick with it. Some people don't understand the 10,000 hour rule, right? Or 10 years on average, right? Which is a real thing. Most people, if you start something at 15, you're not really going to break to about 25, you do find anomalies here and there, and some people slip through the cracks, but it's a real thing. It's a universal law, right? Once you choose whatever you want to do as an art, make sure you want to go with it 2 feet in, right? Don't half step. Don't half step. 2 feet in, right? Still get your education, still go to school, still do those things, right? But go with the art in mind that this is what you want to be, right? That will help you, stay dedicated to it, right? And then realize, like I said too, learn the business of the art you're trying to do and learn how you want to make a living from it. Not just because you want to get rich, but how you can make a living from it, right? And then you might luck up and get rich, but if not, you can still make a living, right? That's my advice.
Thank you very much for that. Last additional question. Have you ever sent an email to Tyler Perry with some of your ideas for theater or films, and has he responded yet?
I hit him up one time on Instagram. I found out because you have to see that blue check or whatever to see if it's official, and I did hit him up, right? And of course, and I was long-winded because I don't like one-line messages and stuff. When I talk to people, it's paragraphs.
Ditto. Yeah, same here, bro.
Yes, man. I'm big on communication. You know what I mean? That's big with me, for many different reasons. But I did hit him up one time. Yes, but he didn't hit me back though. He didn't hit me back. But he did that thumbs up kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, but he didn't hit me back.
Well, hopefully you can bring him to I don't know if, in terms of collaborate. I'm just saying, because he started as an independent in terms of storyteller, and it would be interesting to see. I don't know if he's ever been to Ottawa or Canada. Anyways, Captain, thank you very much for your time. This has been fascinating, and I'll be following along. I'm looking forward to seeing some of these films and attending the screening. So thank you very much for joining us.
No problem. My pleasure. My pleasure.